we're going to get in here. We have the ACC predictions for the 2023 football season. Now, this is the first of the Power Five. It's going to go like this. The SEC is going to be the last conference that I do, which means it's going to be the last conference before I start tallying up a lot of these games and selecting my bowl games and start picking more of the other stuff and really starting to get statistic based as we get to picking champions and things like that. Obviously, I am picking conference champions, but I'm not going any deeper than that right now, and that's bowl games, things like that. But I do hope to do that later. As you can see, I do have the playoff bracket predictor, so that's something I'm going to do in the future anyway. So it's going to go ACC, Big 12. Then we're going to go Pac-12, Big 10, SEC. I'm going Big 10 and SEC last because we both know Michigan and LSU, who are my teams, are going to be in these divisions. And we both know that they're both going to do very well next season. Or we all know that they're going to do very well next season. But I still want to make it very clear that they're probably going to be I'm probably going to be more biased towards them just because I am a big fan of theirs. Anyway, so let's go ahead and start with the Week 1 ACC lineup. Shouldn't be much of a struggle for a lot of these ACC teams. Wake Forest pummels Elon. I don't know where I hold these two teams in actual esteem. I'll go Louisville. Miami, Boston College, Pitt over Wofford, Syracuse over Colgate, NC State over UConn. NC State, I think, is going to be pretty good next season. So that should be interesting. I forgot that this one was a Week 1 game next season. It's going to be a thriller. I think North Carolina is going to win. I don't think North Carolina is great, right? I don't think South Carolina is going to be that great. I think Beamer Ball may go 6-6, 5-5. We'll see how I feel for the actual prediction. But I'm not looking too hot on North Carolina either. But this is going to be a powerhouse game for Week 1. That, and I'm going to have fun with this one. I think Tennessee is going to blow them out of the water. But I think Week 1 has a good set of matches in the ACC and SEC range because they have North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, LSU, and Florida State. So very good, very strong Week 1. Virginia Tech beats Old Dominion. I don't think anybody really doubts that. I'm going to say LSU beats Florida State. For you Florida State fans, I know it's you guys are going to be high on my list, and you will, but it's going to start with an L because LSU, from me keeping up a lot with LSU's recruiting, is bringing in a very strong class and dumping that on one of the best returning classes in college football. And I'll get into that whenever I get into LSU, Alabama, and Georgia, who are clear favorites in the SEC this year. Um, anyway, Clemson beats Duke. I don't think anyone is surprised there. Louisville beats Murray State. Boston College beats Holy Cross. Clemson beats Charleston Southern. Duke beats Lafayette College. Hey, ACC and Big Ten. This is me going over your schedules right here. Stop giving SEC teams shit about playing easy teams at the start of the season. Look at this. Just look at this list of teams for some of the, well, Boston College and Clemson anyway, some of the better teams in college football. Don't give people shit when you do the same thing. Anyway, Florida State will beat Southern Miss. Georgia Tech should beat South Carolina State. I would say I don't really know where I put this for before. I think I'm going to give it to NC State. I'm not really the highest on NC State this year, but I do think they're going to do very well in their out of conference schedule. I also think their out of conference schedule is amazing. I love their out of conference schedule this season. You see teams playing like South Carolina State or Lafayette College, Charleston Southern, Holy Cross, Murray State, to name a few of the others in this conference. But to step up to Notre Dame in week 2 is a strong move. And the same thing goes for Pittsburgh with Cincinnati. I actually think that Cincinnati's going to roll into Pittsburgh and win that. And I just think Cincinnati's going to have a well-rounded football team next year. They're going to be playing very well, and Pittsburgh is going to be playing well, but they're not going to be playing. They're not going to be playing championship football, and I think Cincinnati may be looking at an AAC title. Actually, I think I did the AAC already. Yeah, of course I did. It was the first one I did. So, oh wait. Is Cincinnati in the Big 12 now? Will I be doing them next? Yeah, we are. Okay. I really need to keep up with these. Like, I don't keep up with a lot of the actual movement because LSU is going to be in the SEC, and for the foreseeable future anyway, Michigan's going to be in the Big Ten. So none of it really matters to me. The shakeups don't really matter to me because I'm still going to be playing some. My teams anyway are still going to be playing some heavy talent. Anyway, that's cool. I did not know that in my own head. I did not pick that. I think Cincinnati's going to beat Pittsburgh. Syracuse is going to win this one. I actually think Miami might do this. A lot of people I know overrank Miami every season, and I'm not going to do that, by the way. They're 2-0 right now. They're not going to be that way going forward. But I don't think Texas A&M is going to be entirely repaired going forward, especially after last season's 5-7 debacle. So, and I'll get into that more whenever I get into actually going through SEC games because that's part of Texas A&M's SEC schedule, really heavily. But yeah, so I would say Miami probably wins that one, especially because it's a week 2 game. Miami's a home team, and it should be a strong game for them. Now, Appalachian State can go into teams' own homes like this and do this type of thing, and I think they will. I think Appalachian State wins in North Carolina, and I may have made a contradictory prediction beforehand, but I think Appalachian State can do this because North Carolina has these types of games early in the season that derails everything. James Madison loses to Virginia. Purdue probably loses or beats Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest should beat Vanderbilt. Yeah. So here we are, week 3. Miami beats Bethune-Cookman. Of course they do. Florida State bouncing back really strong, beating out Boston College. Again, Florida State Seminoles fans, I think you're high on the list next year, but I think LSU is just higher on the list next year. I think LSU is realistically going to be fighting with Alabama next year for top of the SEC West. And Georgia is the lone person in the East. Tennessee isn't really all that strong this season. They're strong, don't get me wrong, and I still have them probably 9-3, 10-2. But they're not as strong as they were last season. And LSU is going to be significantly stronger this season. So I would probably put LSU at either 2 or 3 in the SEC, with Georgia being number 1 and Alabama being, the switcher for LSU. So it's either Alabama or LSU at 2 or 3. Anyway, Clemson. Northwestern, I think, beats Duke. Indiana knocks off Louisville. NC State beats VMI, of course. Wake Forest beats Old Dominion, yes. Purdue beats Syracuse, yes. West Virginia. I'm high on West Virginia next season. Not as like a conference favorite. Not like going to win the Big 12 or anything like that, but I'm high on them next season. Rutgers and Virginia Tech. I'm not entirely sure with either of these teams. If Ole Miss doesn't win this game against Georgia Tech, they're gonna get shit on. But yeah, and Maryland and Virginia. This is a hard one. I'm gonna go with Maryland here. And Minnesota and North Carolina. I think North Carolina has that one. All right. So, NC State beats Virginia. I think Florida State knocks off Clemson. It's going to be a hell of a game in week 4. And it also really cements early in the season that Florida State is here to stay, and Clemson is really not losing their grip, because they're still going to be a great team, and I think they're going to be heavily in the rankings. Like, I think number 1, 2, and 3 by the end of this season are probably easily going to be NC State, Florida State, and Clemson in the ACC. Virginia Tech should beat Marshall on the road. UNC should beat Pitt. I'm not very high on Pittsburgh next season, guys. I'm really not. Miami beats Temple. I think Army beats Syracuse. I said that. I think Army is going to have a decent team next season. Duke beats UConn. I'm not very high on UConn next season. Boston College beats Louisville, and Wake Forest beats Georgia Tech. All right, week 5. Week 5 has some interesting games. NC State, Louisville. Hard hitter here in conference. I don't think this is really going to be much of a challenge for NC State. And that puts Louisville at 2-3, 1-2 in conference. They're really hurting. Boston College beats Virginia. I think Boston College is still a hard-hitting team. And Virginia is just not. Like, if we see down here, like, I don't know why Miami is down here. Maybe because, this is the cutoff. But they're top because they really haven't gotten into play. But I don't know if Miami can beat Clemson, Florida State, Wake Forest, and NC State. I think they could beat North Carolina State and Boston College, but I don't know if they can beat the other 4 up there. And that would put Miami really, really low on the bar for a possible top 2 run at this, conference championship. So that's not likely to happen. Anyway, Notre Dame beats Duke. Don't think that's much of an issue. Bowling Green, I have beating Georgia Tech. Clemson goes on the road, beats Syracuse. I think Pittsburgh's better than Virginia Tech. I don't know how people feel about that. Anyway, I think Wake Forest could realistically knock off Clemson here. I think Clemson does knock them off and kind of hurts all of these other teams' playoff rankings, like all of the ACC playoff rankings. Florida State probably bounces back pretty quickly because I think LSU this is week 6, probably 5-0, 6-0. So this Florida State game, their one loss here still looks really good, and that's the reason that they're higher than North Carolina, Clemson, Boston College, Wake Forest, these other teams that are 3-1. They're also in conference. They play more in conference games too. But Florida State, speaking of, going to win, keep their in-conference schedule rolling, beat Virginia Tech. NC State beats Marshall, out of conference, not really affecting any of this, but they're going to get the job done 6-0. Miami beats Georgia Tech, cementing Miami as one of the better teams and now having a conference schedule. But again, that's for now, and I don't think it's going to stay that way. Like I said, my top 4 in the ACC next year is NC State, Florida State, Clemson, and Wake Forest. Yeah. I think North Carolina beats Syracuse. I think Boston College beats Army. Virginia beats William and Mary, of course. And I think Louisville gets knocked off by Notre Dame. Notre Dame, good on you. Anyway, now we're going to look directly. I haven't been delving into it, but now we're going to do what I call the review, kind of if the playoffs or the conference championship happened today in middle of the season of the predictions, what would they be? And so NC State currently in my run of at least this run of the ACC prediction for 2023 would be 6-0, 2-0 in conference. Miami would be 5-0, 1-0 in conference. We're going to see some crazy stuff happen later with that. Florida State would be 4-1, 3-0 in conference. North Carolina 4-1, 2-0 in conference. Clemson 5-1, 3-1 in conference. Boston College 5-1, 2-1 in conference. Wake Forest 4-1, 1-1 in conference. Pittsburgh 2-3, 1-1 in conference. And now we see the drop off where we're getting down to Georgia Tech levels where they could possibly not win any games next year at all. Week 7. Let's go. Duke, NC State. I think NC State carries on, keeps the run going. They're going to beat Duke. Florida State beats Syracuse, sending Syracuse continuing to fall to the bottom of the ACC. And Pittsburgh beats Louisville, solidifying Pittsburgh's kind of in the middle of the ACC. I think Miami finally gets upset, and it really is going to knock them back down to earth. A loss to North Carolina. And keep in mind, North Carolina should play Florida State, NC State, Clemson, a lot of these teams later in the season. So North Carolina is going to get knocked off this pedestal too. A lot of these teams will. Wake Forest beats Virginia Tech. That's going to happen. Week 8, Florida State beats Duke. Boston College goes on the road, beats Georgia Tech. Obviously, Clemson knocks off Miami. Again, second week in a row, and it's going to be because Miami is not actually that nice. They're not built that nice for these types of victories. And this could be a year where Miami theoretically could beat Clemson, right? But I don't think they will. They don't seem to have the strongest group for it. And this is where North Carolina really fucks up. And they always do it. Virginia's going to beat them, sending them plummeting down the ladder of the ACC lever. And West Virginia is going to, or not West Virginia, Wake Forest is going to beat Pitt. Here we go, week 9. Boston College beats UConn. I think Virginia Tech beats Syracuse. NC State North Carolina, not NC State, beats Virginia or Georgia Tech. NC State plays Clemson. I'm gonna give this one to Clemson. I'm gonna give Notre Dame over Pitt. Miami beats Virginia. I think Louisville is better than Duke. And I think Florida State goes on the road and beats Wake Forest, cementing Florida State high in the ACC ranks this season. All right. So before we get into week 10, we're going to take another look at our playoff stances. Things like that, how our ACC is going to look next season. We have a high-end top tier next season with 4 teams, unsurprisingly, pretty high on this list. Florida State 7-1, 6-0 in conference. Clemson 7-1, 5-1 in conference. North Carolina 6-2, 4-1 in conference. NC State 7-1, 3-1 in conference. Boston College 7-1, 3-1 in conference. And these should be interesting going forward. Let's just keep going, keep it rolling. Wake Forest Duke. Uh, I think Syracuse knocks off Boston College and kind of derails their season. Boston College always has a game like that, and I think they're still going to have one next season. Clemson's going to get knocked off by Notre Dame. I think it's going to happen, and it's going to hurt them. At least their playoff chances next season. NC State's going to knock off Miami, putting Miami back down the board, being now 2-3 in conference and 6-3 overall. Again, I told you I was not very high on Miami in the conference of the ACC this year. Florida State goes on the road, beats Pittsburgh, fairly clear. North Carolina plays Campbell, beats them. Virginia plays Georgia Tech, beats them. And I think Louisville probably beats Virginia Tech. Okay. Week 11. Louisville, Virginia. I think Louisville beats Virginia. I think Louisville's going to have a decent team next season, to be honest. Boston College tends to do this. They'll build up a possibility early and then lose random games to teams they shouldn't. And so I'm going to have them lose to Virginia Tech. I'm going to have Clemson beat Georgia Tech, putting Clemson high on this list now. Florida State beats Miami. Fucking 6-4 Miami now. Syracuse, Pittsburgh. I'm going to go for probably Pitt here. North Carolina over Duke. And I'm going to say NC State probably ends Wake Forest's run this year. Wake Forest is going to have a run soon, but it's just not going to be this season. NC State wins, puts themselves at 9-1, 5-1 in the division, and they are looking to try and get a win over Clemson or something of that nature to put them in the top two. They are desperately in the running for the ACC title and realistically possible berth in the playoffs. Florida State at 9-1 as well, especially with Florida State's lone loss being LSU. I feel like they're more playing for the playoffs, unless NC State can beat them in, the championship here. So there's a lot that could happen here. Boston College beats Pittsburgh, just off the rip. That's what's going to happen. I think North Carolina loses to Clemson. Florida State's going to beat North Alabama. Of course they are, putting Florida State at 10-1. Highly ranked, as expected. Syracuse goes on the road, beats Georgia Tech, putting Georgia Tech at 0-11. A long cry from that 222-0 over Cumberland, isn't it? Anyway, Notre Dame continues their spoiling the ACC by beating Wake Forest. Miami beats Louisville, cementing Miami heavily in the center pack and cementing Louisville pretty low still. Actually, Miami in the pack is lower than Louisville, even still. Virginia beats Duke. And NC State goes on the road and beats Virginia Tech. So, going into week 13, the last week of football, I don't think they have a week 14 game. No, they don't. So, this is going to be the games that decide who is and is not in the ACC championship game. Firstly, North Carolina, Boston College, Wake Forest. These teams are not looking for that. None of these teams are looking for that right now. The only teams that are really in the running right now, Florida State at a perfect conference schedule. They play Florida. They're done. Even if they lose here, they're still in the ACC championship. So they're good here. Clemson actually. Wait. Oh, wait. So NC State. Who does NC? Okay. That's how. NC State with a win, right, would be 7-1. But for some reason, it still puts Clemson there. Okay, I guess this week does nothing. Well, NC State's going to beat North Carolina anyway. Georgia is going to win that. Pittsburgh probably beats Duke. Boston College knocks off Miami. Sorry, Miami fans. You're just a mediocre team. Wake Forest beats Syracuse. Virginia over Virginia Tech. Kentucky over Louisville. Clemson over South Carolina. Actually, I'll give that to Beaver Ball. And then Florida State over Florida, of course. Okay. So, personally, I think it should be 11-1 Florida State against 11-1 NC State. Because Clemson being 9-3 and 7-1 in conference doesn't sit right with me. So they don't weigh strength of schedule on this, so I think I'm going to have to look and say Clemson probably would not make it for me. It would probably be Florida State, NC State in the ACC championship. And I realistically think Florida State would win that. So hopefully you all did enjoy. If you do, make sure to like, make sure to comment, and subscribe. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.